Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She pulled her hand away in the middle of a crowded subway, and that was the moment the siren finally went off in my head. Not the station alarm, not the sound that sends you into burning houses. A quieter one, the kind that tells you something's already over. You're just the last one to get the memo. We were sitting side by side in the booth, my hand on her thigh out of habit more than anything. Long day at the firehouse, smoke still in my clothes, my body running on 3 hours of sleep and black coffee. I wasn't asking for much. Just warmth. Just proof that the life I dragged myself back to after every shift was still ours. When she flinched, it wasn't big. She just slid a few inches away, moved my hand like it was a napkin in the wrong place, kept talking about some campaign she was running for a client. Her voice didn't even drop. She laughed at something on her phone, turned the screen slightly away. She said she was tired. Said touch felt draining after spending all day online with people. Said she needed energetic space. The words sounded like they came off a podcast, not out of her. I went quiet. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just off. Like someone had flipped the breaker inside me. Across from us, a couple held hands over their plastic trays, fingers laced, eyes stupidly soft. I caught my reflection in the window behind them, sitting there in my uniform, shoulders rounded, hand now resting on the table like it had nowhere to belong. While she picked tomatoes out of her sandwich, her thumb kept scrolling. I caught flashes on the screen between bites, a private Facebook group, a flyer for a women's embodiment circle, a man's face in a small profile picture at the top of a live stream. Charismatic smile, 2 white teeth, the kind of guy who calls everything sacred and means none of it. She told me he was just a mentor hosting growth sessions. I remember the way her eyes lit up when she said his name, how she never looked at me like that when I walked back in from a 30-foot ladder with someone's kid in my arms. I didn't argue. I didn't ask who he really was to her. I just nodded, finished my sandwich in silence, and let my hand stay where she'd left it. Off her. Out of the way. That night, lying beside her while she fell asleep listening to his voice through her AirPods, I understood something ugly and simple. A woman doesn't have to sleep with someone to leave you. She just has to stop reaching back. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I reached for her first. I noticed the first crack a few days later, during a slow afternoon at the station, when my captain, Harris, pulled me aside. He wasn't the type to involve himself in anyone's marriage. The job already gave us more than enough ghosts to carry. But he'd seen her earlier that morning in the parking lot when she dropped off a charger I'd forgotten at home. He mentioned it casually, almost like he regretted saying anything the moment it came out. Said she looked different, lighter, like she was walking towards something instead of back to me. Said she was on the phone with someone, smiling in a way he hadn't seen from her in a long time. That part hit harder than it should have. Harder than a blowback of heat. Harder than falling through a roof. I didn't tell him about Subway. I didn't tell him how she turned away from my hand like it carried smoke. I just went back to checking gear, tightening straps, running my routine like it was armor. The sirens didn't go off that day. The station hummed with quiet, the kind that makes every thought louder. When I got home, she wasn't there. Just a pile of Amazon boxes near the door, filled with things she called tools for her new self. Oils, journals, crystals, fabrics she draped around the house like a new religion was moving in. On the counter lay a flyer with that same mentor's face printed across the top. I flipped it over once, then put it back exactly where I found it. She came home later wearing something from Old Navy, flowy and soft, her hair pinned up like she'd stepped out of someone else's life. She talked about a workshop she'd attended, how it opened her heart, how she felt seen. She didn't mention by whom. She didn't have to. Her eyes already did. I stayed quiet. Not out of fear, not out of confusion. Something colder. A shift I didn't fully understand yet. I watched her move around the kitchen, watched the gap between us widen with every word she didn't say. For the first time, I felt myself leaning inward, away from her orbit, as if some part of me already knew. This wasn't a phase. This was a departure. And she'd left days ago. The shift came the following week, subtle enough that she assumed I wouldn't notice. But in my line of work, you learn to read smoke before you ever see flames. And what I started seeing wasn't smoke from the job. It was from my own house. It began with her laptop left open on the couch one morning. She usually guarded it the way people guard diaries, closing tabs the second I walked by. But that day she was rushing out the door for one of her alignment circles, wearing another loose Old Navy sweater that made her look like she was dissolving into air. I walked into the living room after she left, fully intending to shut the laptop and move on. I wasn't the type to snoop. Never needed to. She used to tell me everything before I asked. But the screen was glowing. Messages were open. Not romantic. Not sexual. Something worse. He was sending her voice notes. Long ones, dripping with performative empathy, crafted to feel intimate while staying completely clean. He told her she was untapped potential, that she was rising, that she needed to release old anchors. I didn't need to ask who the anchor was. She wrote back with paragraphs about our marriage, framed like she was talking about a past life she'd already outgrown. She said she felt held by his guidance. That word stuck in my ribs. There were timestamps from late at night, hours when I'd come home from the station and found her already asleep, AirPods in, body turned away. She hadn't been sleeping. She'd been listening to him. In the kitchen, I found a handwritten schedule she'd made for herself. Color-coded, taped to the fridge. Workshops, group calls, morning meditations, content meetings. Not a single line included us. Next to it sat more Amazon boxes, tripods, ring lights, journals branded with motivational quotes. Tools to build a life that didn't need me in it. I stayed quiet. That new, unfamiliar quiet that didn't beg for clarity or closeness. It just observed. I kept my breathing steady, the same way I do when stepping into a room filled with smoke, waiting for the heat to reveal where the danger really sits. She came home later and kissed my cheek out of habit, not intention. She didn't notice my expression shift, didn't notice that something in me had already stepped back. That was the moment I stopped trying to hold what didn't want to be held. The disappearance didn't start with the door closing. It started with silence. The kind that shifts the air in a house. The kind you don't notice until it's already thick enough to breathe differently. I didn't announce anything. Didn't pack bags in front of her or make a speech about needing space. I just stopped waiting for her to return to a version of us she'd already outgrown. One morning, after a long night call that left my body humming with leftover adrenaline, I drove past our street and kept going. No planning, no anger, just a clean, instinctive break. I ended up at Lowe's, walking the aisles like they were a cathedral. Wood, tools, hardware, things that were honest, solid, unchanging. I bought nothing. I just let myself exist somewhere she hadn't rewritten the rules. When I finally checked my phone, I had 5 missed calls from her. Then 8. Then a string of texts asking where I was, saying she needed to feel connected again. Those words would have once pulled me straight home. Now they felt like echoes from a room I'd already stepped out of. I turned the phone face down and let it vibrate until it stopped. I checked into a small rental near the bay for a few nights. Simple place, clean, quiet. I slept for 12 hours straight. Woke up without her voice in the next room or her mentor's voice bleeding through her headphones. I got breakfast at IHOP, sat alone by the window, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. My own thoughts settling into place. She kept calling. The messages shifted from confused to panicked, then softened into something that almost sounded like apology. She said she felt ungrounded. She asked why I wasn't reaching back. I didn't answer, not out of punishment, but because I'd finally realized the truth. You can't reconnect with someone who disconnected long before you ever noticed. At night, I walked the pier and watched couples pass by, hands linked without effort. I didn't miss her. I missed the man I used to be when her hand still stayed in mine. And for the first time, I felt the first flicker of the version of myself I was about to become. I didn't plan to look into him. I wasn't jealous, and I wasn't trying to win her back. But after a few days away, after enough unanswered calls from her to make the silence feel complete, I started thinking like a firefighter again. Not emotionally. Practically. You don't run into a burning building. You read its structure first. And the man she called her mentor had a structure that didn't look stable. It started when I returned home early one morning to pick up a few things. She wasn't there. The house felt staged, every blanket folded, every candle placed at the angles he preached about. More Amazon boxes sat unopened near the door, filled with things she thought would fix her life from the outside in. On the counter, her phone lit up with a notification. His name. A preview of a message he'd sent her before sunrise. It wasn't intimate. It was strategic. A script. Words designed to pull her further in. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I'd already seen enough to know he wasn't just guiding her. He was building a dependency. I went into the backyard, sat at the table we'd built together years ago, and looked him up. Not through gossip. Through records. Public filings, workshops he'd sold, companies he'd opened and shut down, complaints buried under polished branding. I wasn't hunting for dirt. I was searching for the truth she refused to see. And the truth was simple. He was a salesman dressed as a prophet. I sent nothing to her. Said nothing. But I forwarded a few documents, just links, nothing else, to the coordinator of the retreat center he worked with. Open sources. Public records. Things they should have known before platforming him. I didn't claim wrongdoing. I didn't accuse. I just let facts breathe. A week later, quiet as a match dying in the wind, his schedule shifted. Workshops postponed. Retreat dates removed. His name slowly sliding off flyers like paint peeling from a wall. She noticed before she admitted it, checking her phone again and again, waiting for direction he could no longer provide. I didn't expose him. I didn't need to. I simply stopped treating him like someone untouchable. And without the pedestal she'd given him, he had nothing to stand on. The social hit didn't come from me. It never does. People think a marriage cracks in private, behind doors no one opens. But the truth is simpler. The world always notices before the couple does. And in our case, it started at her sister's house, during a small family dinner I hadn't planned on attending. I showed up because I no longer avoided anything. Distance had given me a strange kind of calm, the kind that lets you walk into a room already knowing you owe no one an explanation. She arrived late. Floaty dress from Old Navy, hair styled like a woman curating a new season of herself, smile polished but brittle. She hugged everyone a little too long, held conversations like auditions. She didn't come near me at first, not because she was angry, because she didn't know which version of me she'd find. The man she left behind, or the one who walked out without closing the door. Midway through dinner, her phone kept lighting up beside her plate. Notifications from groups she used to obsess over. Now they only made her fingers tremble. Her mentor's retreat page had gone quiet, his posts deleted, his upcoming transformations replaced with a single announcement about restructuring. She kept refreshing the screen like it owed her reassurance. People noticed. Her sister leaned toward her, lowered her voice just enough for the table to hear, and asked why everything connected to her spiritual guide was suddenly being questioned online. Her brother made a comment about how these self-proclaimed mentors always crash eventually. Her mother asked if she was okay, because she looked pale and thinner than last month. None of it was malicious. Just honest curiosity hitting someone who'd built her identity on a man who'd vanished from his own platform. I watched her swallow hard, trying to keep her composure. When she finally looked at me, it wasn't anger in her eyes. It was confusion, like she couldn't understand how her world was tilting while I was sitting there, steady, unmoved. Later in the evening, her sister pulled her aside. I didn't hear the words, only the tone, sharp, disappointed, protective. And then the one sentence that carried across the room, whether she wanted it to or not. "You really thought no one would notice you drifting away?" She froze. Completely. And for the first time since all of this began, it wasn't me she looked to for grounding. It was the empty space where her mentor used to stand in her mind. The silence around her didn't come from me anymore. It came from everyone else. She unraveled quietly. Not fast, not dramatic. Just thread by thread, the way a sweater loosens after one pulled stitch. Her world had been built on digital air, groups, messages, live streams. The mentor she swore was expanding her spirit. When his presence collapsed, everything she'd leaned on went with it. And suddenly she was standing on ground she hadn't touched in months. Real life. Real silence. Real consequences. She tried to pretend nothing had shifted, but the signs were everywhere. The journal from Amazon sat untouched on the coffee table. The color-coded schedule on the fridge was half blackened with canceled sessions. Even the house felt different. Less like a sanctuary and more like a stage she'd forgotten how to perform on. I stayed in the home, but not with her. We moved through the same rooms like two ghosts sharing a corridor. I woke before sunrise, drove to the station early, trained longer, stayed later. She would step into the kitchen as I stepped out, trying to make eye contact that landed on empty air. She asked once if we could talk, her voice thin, unsure. But the shift in me had already completed itself. I didn't snap, didn't accuse. I just answered with the kind of quiet that offers nothing to grab onto. A simple, steady silence that made her realize I wasn't withholding affection. I wasn't offering myself as a landing place anymore. Her friends noticed too. The ones from her women's circle stopped replying when the mentor's absence made their group lose momentum. Her colleagues at the agency kept their distance, unsure how to approach someone whose confidence had been borrowed from someone else. Even her sister, who had always been her shield, pulled back to give her space she didn't know how to fill. At home, she tried small gestures. Making dinner, leaving a blanket folded near the couch, wearing the old sweatshirt of mine she never used to take off. But these things weren't reaching me. I wasn't angry. I was simply gone, present in the room, but unreachable. I spent an evening driving the car, quiet, clean, electric, through the back roads outside town. No destination. No need for one. I parked near the bay and watched the water settle in the dark, thinking how easy it is for a person to lose themselves chasing something that was never real. She hadn't lost me. She'd lost the version of herself who believed she didn't need me. She finally broke the silence on a cold Saturday morning, the kind where the house feels larger than it is. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, tying my boots, getting ready to leave for a training shift I didn't technically need to attend. She hovered in the doorway like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to enter her own home. For months, she'd been the one pulling away. Now it looked like she was afraid I might vanish if she breathed too loudly. She asked if we could talk, not in the lofty, coached tone she'd used during her growth phase, but in a voice that sounded stripped, uncertain, painfully human. I didn't answer right away. I didn't move toward her. I just waited, letting the quiet draw the line she once ignored. She said she'd been lost, said she got caught up in a world that made her feel important, seen, needed. She talked about how the mentor filled a space she didn't know was empty. She admitted she'd pushed me away without realizing how far she'd gone. She said all this with her eyes fixed on the floor because looking at me seemed too heavy to manage. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rescue her from the discomfort she'd earned. I sat still, letting her words fall into the space between us like debris from a building that had already collapsed. She wiped her face once with the sleeve of an old sweatshirt, the same one she'd worn during our better years, trying to remind herself of the woman she used to be. When I finally spoke, it wasn't dramatic. I told her I'd been watching her drift for months while I stayed rooted in a life I thought we shared. I told her I didn't leave to punish her. I left because reaching for someone who keeps stepping back eventually becomes its own kind of emptiness. I told her I had changed, quietly, deliberately. Outside, the car waited in the driveway, the one I'd bought during my reset, my Tesla Model 3, the only time I'd ever name it out loud before calling it just the car from then on. She glanced toward it, realizing she didn't know the man who drove it anymore. She asked if there was still a way back. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because for once, the weight of the moment belonged to her, not me. Her collapse didn't arrive like a scream. It came as a slow, undeniable folding in of everything she thought made her untouchable. In the days after our conversation, she moved through the house like someone living inside a memory she wasn't ready to face. Every room reminded her of a version of us she'd traded for a world built on live streams and false awakenings. And now that world was gone, evaporated the moment its center disappeared. She tried to return to work, but even there the shift was obvious. Her coworkers tiptoed around her, unsure how to talk to the woman who once preached about alignment and energetic boundaries, but now sat at her desk staring at a blank screen. She wasn't fired. She wasn't shamed. She was just unseen. The digital glow she'd wrapped herself in had dimmed, leaving her exposed under normal fluorescent lights. One afternoon, I stopped by the house between shifts to grab a change of clothes. She was sitting on the floor in the living room, surrounded by Amazon boxes she'd never opened. Crystals, journals, books on empowerment, tools she bought to become someone who no longer needed me. They looked ridiculous scattered across the carpet, stripped of their meaning now that the voice that once told her she was ascending had gone silent. She didn't see me at first. She was holding one of the journals, flipping through pages she'd filled months ago, reading words that sounded like someone else had written them. Affirmations, promises, Lines about releasing the past. She pressed her hand to her mouth, and I realized she wasn't crying from regret. She was crying because she was finally seeing the truth without anyone else interpreting it for her. When she noticed me, she straightened as if trying to rebuild her posture from the inside out. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Not because she had nothing to say, because she finally understood that apologies don't rebuild what distance breaks. I didn't step toward her. I didn't kneel beside her. I didn't offer comfort. I simply stood there, steady, the way I've stood inside burning rooms waiting for heat to roll back so I can see what's left. And in that moment, her memories flooded in. Not the spiritual highs, not the circles or mantras, real memories. My hand on her back during her worst year. My voice grounding her during storms she'd forgotten she'd survived. The dinners at Subway where I was still the man she reached for first. All of it hitting her at once. Reality finally caught up, and she realized I wasn't her anchor anymore because she had let go first. The final moment between us didn't arrive with shouting or heartbreak. It came in a stillness so complete it felt like the air paused to listen. Days had passed since I found her on the floor with her abandoned journals, and we'd been orbiting each other quietly, two people sharing a house, but not a life. I woke early that morning, the kind of early that comes from habit, not duty. I brewed coffee, gathered my gear, and stepped outside to breathe the cold air before heading to the station. She followed me out onto the porch, barefoot, wrapped in one of my old hoodies like she was trying to borrow warmth from a time she couldn't step back into. She looked tired in a way that wasn't about sleep. Tired in the soul. Tired from holding onto illusions that finally fell apart in her hands. She said she understood now. Not everything. She wasn't pretending that, but enough. She said she'd lost herself trying to become someone elevated, someone polished, someone validated by a man who sold certainty the way other people sell merchandise at Lowe's. She said she didn't see what she was doing to us until the noise stopped, and all she could hear was her own emptiness echoing back. I listened without interrupting. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I was present, steady, grounded in a way I hadn't been in months. She took a small step toward me, reaching out, not with desperation, but with something closer to honesty. It was the first time she'd reached for me in what felt like forever. But by the time her hand lifted, mine was already occupied. I didn't flaunt it. I didn't hold it up for her to see. I simply turned slightly, and there she was. Emily, a paramedic I'd known for years, someone who carried her own storms with quiet strength. We'd grown close over long nights on shift, not through intensity, but through the simplicity of two people showing up for their lives fully. Holding her hand felt natural, not symbolic. Real, not reactionary. My wife froze, not from anger, but from understanding. Deep, sharp understanding. I told her, softly, that I hadn't disappeared. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving because the version of me she once pushed away had learned to stand without waiting for her to return. As I walked toward the car with Emily beside me, my wife didn't call after me. She didn't beg. She just stood there in the cold morning light, realizing the silence she once demanded had finally answered her back. And for the first time, the ending didn't hurt. It just felt true. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.